Welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Join us every Wednesday to learn about the latest cutting-edge developments in the real-time communications industry. ClueCon Weekly is brought to you by FreeSwitch Solutions. Get support and professional services directly from the creators of the FreeSwitch open source project, solving your issues in the most efficient, stable, and scalable way possible. Get the FreeSwitch advantage. Visit freeswitch.com. Also brought to you by ClueCon, the premier technology conference for developers by developers. Join us every summer in Chicago. ClueCon kicks off on Monday with our annual hackathon, The Coder Games, followed by 3 days of technology-rich presentations discussing telecom, WebRTC, and IoT from developers around the world. To learn more, visit ClueCon.com or call 877-74-CLUE.
All right, guys, welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Today is the 6th of December, 2017. Getting ready to move into the holiday season here, guys. So happy holidays to everybody out there. This week on ClueCon Weekly, we're going to have Bogdan Iancu from the OpenSIPS project. So you guys stand by for that. Let's go over to Miss Kathleen and see what she has for the news today. Kathleen?
Thanks, Ken. We're gearing up for ClueCon 2018, and we're super excited to announce that VoiceTel will be joining us again this year as a sponsor. And register for the magical Sunset Boat Tour down the river and into Lake Michigan. Sign up when you register. And if you're interested in sponsoring ClueCon, send us an email at marketing@cluecon.com. Don't forget to save the date for ClueCon. It'll be earlier this year, taking place from July 23rd to July 26th. And while you're here, check out our new YouTube video about registering SIP endpoints in our tips and tricks playlist on our channel. We'll continue to add instructional videos periodically, so make sure you subscribe to get all the updates. And in February, the team is heading to Fort Lauderdale, Florida for IT Expo. We're offering a free full-day training on February the 13th, and the sign-up link and more information will be posted to our Facebook and Twitter. Or you can visit the IT Expo website. Look for us at booth 120 to get some limited edition FreeSwitch swag. We'll be playing Tic-Tac-Verto and handing out some cool prizes. And you can drop by to play and add your name to our Friday drawing to win a seriously awesome grand prize. And as usual, be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for our mailing list for all the latest and greatest FreeSwitch and ClueCon news. Stay tuned for next week. We have Richard Newman from Sub2R. And thanks for watching. Back to you, Ken.
Hey, cool. Thank you very much, Kathleen. So next up, we're going to have Mr. Jersey Mike. Jersey Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you, Ken.
So you want to tell us what's up for the Community Corner?
Yes, today we have a question from the mailing list. And to answer the question, we have Mike Jarris, one of the core members of the FreeSwitch team. The question is, FreeSwitch is presenting ringback to a calling party by default. Is there a way to shut that feature off?
All right, so to talk about this, we need to kind of explain what the default behavior is. So the default behavior is if the B-leg party passes through early media, we will pass that through to the A-leg party. So if there's kind of an in-media ringback, it will pass that through. There's a param to shut that off called ignore early media. So if you pass ignore early media equals true in your dial string, in the curly brackets, it will disable that feature. The other thing that can happen is you can get a non-media ringback indication. In that case, we'll pass that through as well. If you set the ringback variable to a file source or a file stream source, we will replace that indication with audio of that. So if you wanted to pass no indication, you do ignore early media and set ringback to silence stream. That would completely suppress that. I guess the follow-up question to that is, what do they actually want it to do? Do they just want silence? What's the intention there? So there's lots of things you can do. It's just a matter of what do you want.
Well, I think maybe Jerry Chin could also utilize custom ringback tones, right? Which is also an
Absolutely.
option.
Absolutely, you can do color ringback just by instead of setting that ringback variable to silence stream, you would set it to whatever kind of audio file that you would want. In fact, with FreeSwitch, if it's a video call, you can even use video there as well.
Well, thank you, Michael Jarris. And now for Bogdan Iancu. Bogdan?
Hi, Michael. Thank you. And I'm glad to be once again with you at ClueCon Weekly.
Well, we're very happy to have you on the show, that's for sure.
Yeah, I guess we should do this more often because, to be honest, I don't even. Okay, there are too many things in my mind, but I don't even remember when was the last time being here. Probably was somewhere like maybe in the very beginning of the year and so on. And well, we have so many interesting things, especially in relation to FreeSwitch. So probably we should try to be more present, but that's probably our fault. You know, sometimes time it's a critical resource.
Well, I know you guys are always so very busy. So can you tell us what you do for OpenSIPS?
Wow, that's a really good question because originally, I mean, in the very beginning, most of my time dedicated to the project went into development, programming, and so on. But one of the things that I'm not so happy with, from my perspective at least, is that this time is more and more allocated into managing, let's say, the project. I mean, taking care of the directions in terms of coding, taking care of different events we do around the project, participation to other events, and so on and so on. So it's more and more, as I said, time allocated to the management, to high-level design discussions, and so on. And to a certain point, to be honest, I really miss writing lines of code. I mean, I'm trying to get some time to do that, you know.
The management project is always, one of the most important aspects to it because it controls where you're going in the future. And
yes, you cannot have one without the other.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but luckily, I have here in the office with me. We have a quite skillful and dedicated team of people who, let's say, contribute a lot in compensating with their code writing and brainstorming and discussing a lot of things. So somehow we share what means running the whole project from A to Z. It's a team effort.
And so I understand you've got a new upcoming release.
Oh yeah, so we already, let's say, settled this kind of one release per year. Usually it's in the very beginning of March, each year, the beta release. And next year we'll have the 2.4 OpenSIPS release. And the plan, or what should be on the plate for this 2.4 release, was announced roughly like 1 month ago. So it's still a kind of a hot news on this. And briefly, just to say what's about the 2.4, as for the 2.3, for the previous release, we focused a lot on integration with other protocols, integration with other applications, and so on. For the 2.4, for the new release, we decided to focus on clustering. So adding more clustering capabilities into OpenSIPS. And this decision was taken based on the feedback, on the polls we got, from the community, talking to people like, okay, what they would expect, what they would like to see from OpenSIPS. So we said, okay, it's quite a demand for something like that. So let's focus for this release on the clustering support.
So would it be clustering from a database perspective, like registrations and local stores and stuff like that? What's the extent of where it'll be?
Well, okay, that's a bit of a longer story. It's clustering from on all layers, because we start building a clustering layer to ensure node-to-node communication between OpenSIPS instances, actually to form a consistent cluster. So it's basically the ability of OpenSIPS to get together and form a cluster, to learn topology, to be able to add new nodes, to calculate routes inside the cluster in order to to exchange data. So more or less, let's say, management of the cluster itself. And also, only for this part, there was quite a lot of work in the clustering module, because we wanted to be sure that before adding functionality on top, so functionality that actually uses the clustering support, this under the hood clustering engine works perfectly and offers all the necessary capabilities. But what people do see and use actually will be the ability of doing clustering for user location, for registration. And there are several models here, because you mentioned, okay, if it's about the database, if it's about what. So we try to analyze what are the real life and the plausible, to use the Mythbusters terminology, what are the plausible scenarios when it comes to clustering user location. And we have we identify several models, depending if your register server is facing directly the endpoint, so you have a lot of restrictions in terms of the networking, like you have to deal with the NAT presence, with TCP connections, so more or less things that usually makes your life miserable when it comes to SIP. Or the other way, which is much simpler, when you have the mighty SBC between you and the user, which basically hides all the network level complexity and makes things quite simple in terms of handling the registration. So starting from these two models, we come up with a couple of solutions which rely on a combination of clustering at the database level, so using an NoSQL cluster for storing data, versus using the clustering support in OpenSIPS. So not only for managing the cluster itself, but also for sharing metadata, for identifying where the user is registered, and things like that. So basically, depending on what the topology of your system, of what's the reason for clustering, if you want to achieve for geographical redundant, geographical dispersion, if you want to do simply scaling, you may choose what's the best way to distribute the user location data. So we have kind of a answer for all the situations. And user location is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to clustering, because the same kind of story repeats for presence data, which lately gets more and more used. I mean, you have presence for end user presence, for dialogue, you have the BLF, then you may have for voicemail and sorry?
Especially coming from the class 5 services, that's for sure.
Exactly. So let's say presence, it's more and more used for different kind of class 5 functionalities. So it's a quite high let's say need to be also sure that you are able to scale, to distribute the presence data.
Yeah, of course. Scaling across the distances is always challenging. That's for sure, and that's where some of the traditional databases kind of will have problems.
let's say, maybe from the OpenSIPS perspective, because at least these are the origins of OpenSIPS in terms of being able to handle a lot of traffic. But even if you can say that according to the test you can put like 30,000 calls per second on a box, it doesn't ensure like infinite scalability. And also you need at some point to do like a geographical dispersion of the service or geographical failover. Or you don't want it, to be honest, be crazy enough to put like 1 million calls on a single box, because you think about, okay, if that box fails, maybe half of my service will go down. So it's a bit risky. And really hardware, it's not so expensive. So, trying to, let's say, distribute a service across multiple servers, across multiple locations, it's not necessarily usually because, okay, you have a high throughput. It's just, to build geographical distributed and, let's say, stable in terms of performance service. So, yeah, there are a lot of reasons why to do that. And we looked at what's the best way to combine the clustering at the OpenSIPS layer, like exchanging different kind of data, internal status, and so on, versus, let's say, getting help from the database level in terms of clustering, because we didn't want to go into, sharding data, distributing data. We said, okay, there are other people who already invented the wheel. In that case, the database, NoSQL databases. So let's take advantage of this. So we have some kind of a mixed solution between what OpenSIPS can do, with what a database can help with in terms of, building the clusters.
So when you're building the clusters for the new NoSQL perspective, what's the best way to kind of establish a quorum and make sure the quorum hits eventual consistency?
In terms of clustering, we said to stay away from the SQL databases because, okay, I don't want to get into, let's say, politics about this, but let's say when it comes to big data, when it comes to being able to cluster, to distribute, to shard, the NoSQL databases are the way to go. So usually, an SQL database is good when it comes to the provisioning data, because that's something that you want to be consistent and everything. But when it comes to runtime data, like the dialog information, the registrations, presence information, so which may be a huge volume of data, there are dynamic data and so on. In that case, we said, okay, a NoSQL-oriented database is the answer. So you can use like Redis, Cassandra, Mongo, Couchbase, and whatever other kind of flavors. There's a quite rich support for NoSQL databases in OpenSIPS. And okay, I have here just to share with everyone on the screen. Actually, there is we had I think roughly 1 month ago. There's a blog post about what actually will be in the 2.4 release in terms of distribution of clustering. Sorry, and even you may see here mentioned some Anycast support. I know that this is actually a quite how to say hot potato. Everybody likes to talk about it, so it's a lot of buzzing around the Anycast. We try to look into it to say, okay, what's the real value of Anycast when it comes to SIP? What are the real scenarios, and what implies when Anycast support from the OpenSIPS perspective, or generically, let's say, from a SIP server perspective. So more or less to identify the scenarios where indeed an Anycast will bring value to a SIP NIC-based service. And of course, Anycast makes sense more or less at the edge of your of the SIP servers, of the SIP platforms. Edge server, SBC, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. And so basically, whatever hides your core network. And we try to look into this, identify the scenarios, and even today we had like a 3 hours meeting trying to pinpoint the exact scenario in order to move on with implementation and to get it in the right way. But as I said, all these are based on the clustering module that we have in the OpenSIPS, which it's able to provide not only the management of the cluster itself in terms of which nodes are up, what's the best way to route between two nodes, but also to be able to dynamically join new nodes, also to basically to sync data in a burst between nodes, especially between a new node may request data sync from the cluster, so to be up to date with the data that it's shared between the existing nodes. So there is a lot of work into this clustering support, even if at the end of the day you do not necessarily use it in a direct way. You actually use what's on top of this clustering. But there will be a lot of examples and discussions about this clustering support during the next months, when one by one we will be talking and presenting all these features, and not to mention in May next year when we have the OpenSIPS Summit in Amsterdam. Yes, we love Amsterdam. I think everybody loves Amsterdam. So we have the OpenSIPS Summit over there, where we will talk about and present in depth about the 2.4 release.
So any cast for sure could be very challenging, but the advantages are very substantial.
It is especially that it may come in multiple flavors, because it depends on how you want to use it.
Yeah, and in my experience, I actually operate an Anycast network. The more nodes you have, the more challenging it becomes. If there's only 2 or 3 nodes, it's not so bad. When you start increasing in numbers, it becomes more and more challenging.
Yeah, the idea is just to, let's say, provide in OpenSIPS all the tools you need in order to implement. To take advantage of an Anycast setup at the network layer, because things are quite simple when you are running in normal operations. So when everything works perfectly, in the normal traffic, that's okay. It's not so challenging. The challenging part is when you try to, let's say, to deal with unexpected events in your, let's say, class, like a node disappears. In that case, the question is, can you not necessarily recover the calls, but at least can you do a proper cleanup of the calls to be sure that you don't, you are not left with any kind of a zombie calls, either on the carrier side, either on the user side, and stuff like that. So, in our opinion, this is more important, and actually it's more challenging to try to identify things like that and to properly take care of them.
Yeah, went on a very simplistic level. You just want your audio and signaling to come back. Right?
Well,
which can be a challenge in the beginning when starting with Anycast, right?
Well, let's say that's one of the things. But from the user perspective, at least you want to, let's say, if the call gets disconnected, you'll probably prefer to get a hang up event rather than like a dead call, staying for a couple of minutes to figure out that actually you are talking to no one. To be sure that you don't have any kind of what we call zombie calls on the carrier that will be automatically timed out after like 4 hours. And the question is, who the hell will pay for that? So kind of things like this, right? Because from the user perspective, if you just, the call gets terminated and you redial, okay, it's not such a big deal at the end. But from you as an operator, you want to get things as clean as possible in terms of especially CDRs.
So one of the things that's always really impressed me about you guys the most is accessibility. And so one of the things is when you start, getting into, the signaling layers, you've made it easier for new inbound users to kind of use the software through almost like submodules. So can you explain that a little bit?
Well, I would say that this is a never-ending fight because, there is quite a steep learning curve when it comes to, using OpenSIPS, because you don't have to learn only OpenSIPS, but you have to also learn SIP itself. Yeah. Because, how OpenSIPS works is quite intimate with the SIP protocol. So there is no way you can, let's say, get an abstract of the SIP inside OpenSIPS. You really have to understand how SIP works in order to properly handle it inside OpenSIPS. So even before getting into OpenSIPS, you have to learn SIP. So you already
and if you don't, you can horribly break things very, very easily.
Well, yes, yeah. Yeah. So in order to address this kind of a challenge from our users, we try to make available as many materials as possible in terms like tutorials, webinars, so recorded in terms of explaining the basics, just to get you started. So to get to a point where you can by yourself start digging into the documentation, find things and so on. Documentation itself,
the training and the boot camps are very valuable. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's the step number 2. Once you had your fight with the documentation, next step is if you want to get online training or the real classes, the boot camps, where you get a lot of knowledge, actually basic knowledge on how to use and how to exploit all the OpenSIPS capabilities. And the format of a class is very interactive because it's not only, let's say, getting through the topics which are, let's say, presenting during the training, but there are a lot of open discussions. Everybody has its own agenda at some point in terms of what he wants to do. So it's trying all the time to fit his own agenda with the topics discussed during the training. So it's more like a quite interactive training, addressing the real needs of the students rather than like a monologue. Like, okay, let me tell you a story about the dialogue support or about I don't know what. So
right, and the labs are very helpful too, because one of the things is when you type something, you have a much greater memory retention as opposed to just, seeing a presentation, having it up on the screen, the true interaction and going through the process of actually writing these things on your own is very helpful.
Yeah, even if sometimes the students do hate us for that, for putting them to write stuff, like, okay, what I'm doing here, I'm doing like tape writing or what? But as you said, it's the best way to learn the things, because if you just look at them and just run a script and that's it, I'm not sure how much you'll memorize at the end of the day. But if you put your finger on the keys and you type everything in there and you go through the actual configuration file, in that case, the retention will be much higher. And that's the reason why we have this training, in-class training in multiple flavors, because we also have the the one dedicated to the free switch integration that usually we do in during ClueCon, so each year. I think that will be next year will be the 4th year when we do this, the training. And again, this is especially focused on how you do integration between OpenSIPS and free switch, the mid-registration stuff, which is quite well received by the community in the last year. Actually, they opened quite a kind of a Pandora's box, because now people are saying, okay, can we do some kind of a mid-registration for presence also? Okay, that's a different story. Or, you know, more free switch integration in terms of not only what we have right now, the ability to query for load in order to help with doing a real-time load balancing, you know, between the boxes. For the 2.4 release, we want to make one step further, which will be in being able to grab whatever kind of event free switch may expose to the ESL interface. So we can capture and make it available in the OpenSIPS script. It might help you with whatever kind of a routing you do there.
But
so,
even on a very simplistic level from like a dispatcher and stuff like that, you can there's a call to see the utilization on the free switch, and then, you know, have an algorithm based on that, which is unique.
True. Yeah. That's somehow this opened the appetite for, you know, other kind of let's say different kind of integrations. One of the events, and people were looking like, okay, can I capture some DTMF events from free switch and make them available in the, let's say, in the OpenSIPS script, or can I monitor the call status, so to see exactly what happens with the call in free switch? So based on that, I can take routing decisions in OpenSIPS. So that's something that we are working on, exposing all the free switch events into OpenSIPS, so it may help you with the routing, and expose in a raw way the access to the ESL interface. So from the OpenSIPS script, actually you can push different kind of commands relative to ongoing calls, maybe to free switch. So it's actually, or even
using something like, you know, press 0 and all of a sudden SIPREC comes in and you're recording the session from the DTMF event.
Yeah, more or less that's the idea. And for this we have to say thank you to Giovanni, because let's say he's the man starting all this. He pointed to the direction and he contributed with code into this direction. We are still working together in order to let's say adapt it in a more generic way before being uploaded. But the idea is that different kind of integration work that was started in 2.3 release is actually going on right now with the 2.4. Even if we said 2.4 is, you know, mainly focused on clustering, we cannot simply park you know, topics. So let's say special like integration with other pieces of with other projects. Also, Homer is still ongoing. Yeah. You know, it's like you know, different things pop up like on daily basis. All the time talking with Lorenzo about like what other crazy stuff we may do, and you know, so
the Homer integration is really cool. I mean, that's great, and yeah, and you know, it's always good to know what's going on in your network, right?
Yeah, and we said, okay, now, you know, we started with like exposing SIP traffic. We said, okay, let's expose REST queries, let's expose network events, and now we said, okay, let's expose media. Related events, like when you engage in external media relay, or when you perform a database query, so you get all these kind of data attached to the SIP call, so you can, you know, get a better understanding on what's going on with your you know, with your script and you know what actually OpenSIPS is doing. So it's building such kind of puzzles between different kind of software. You take OpenSIPS, you put FreeSwitch, you put CGRate, you can put Homer together, and at the end of the day, it's like, wow, I built a kind of a Frankenstein or something like that. That's really challenging and fun.
That's for sure. And it could be a little nerve-wracking too.
Well, yeah, but at the end, the end result pays off for all the misery you had to go through.
So, let's hear a little bit more about the FreeSwitch integrations, because this is ClueCon Weekly.
Okay. So at this in the 2.3 version, we have this quite, let's say, limited, but it was a first attempt, capability to fetch, load information from FreeSwitch, and that was needed in order to control or / adjust, whatever you want to call it, the load balancing or the distribution process, the dispatching process of calls into OpenSIPS. Because so far, the balancing or the dispatching of the call was exclusively done based on whatever OpenSIPS thinks of, load of the FreeSwitch without no, let's say, real means of learning this load. And now we have said, okay, we actually can go through the ESL and find out through this heartbeat events what's the actual load, because you may have other endpoints, sending traffic to FreeSwitch, not necessarily OpenSIPS, or traffic which is invisible for OpenSIPS, or you never know how these calls will translate in terms of load, like CPU usage, and so. It's much better than simply counting calls. You get, the real number of channels on FreeSwitch. You can see some CPU usage, and you can get some better metrics in terms of, okay, what's the load, how many calls, how many more calls I can put on this FreeSwitch box. And Giovanni wanted to bring all this to a new level in the 2.4. So he said, okay, if you have the ability to get events like the heartbeat event, why not trying to get more events, events related to the calls, like certain call was established or terminated, or was a DTMF was generated for a call. So all this information you can subscribe from the OpenSIPS level to such events. You can get them into the script, and you can use them for routing calls, or for going back, let's say, to FreeSwitch, to the ESL interface, which now it's exposed directly at the OpenSIPS script level. So you can go back to FreeSwitch and give more instructions in terms of what to do with that call. Like, okay, play this IVR right now, or place this announcement or routing according to this dial plan right now, and different kind of things that give some guidance in terms of how the call should be handled. So you can get a mixage between call being controlled and processed at the OpenSIPS layer and at the FreeSwitch layer. So they are working actually together in terms of doing the call. It's not like serialized, like you can do your stuff in OpenSIPS and then pass the call to FreeSwitch, or vice versa. Is both of them do work together in order to handle the call. So that's something really cool, especially if you use it with event-based routing in OpenSIPS, where you can wait for external events in an asynchronous way before taking routing decisions. So let's say you can wait for your call before having DTMF being generated, or you can wait for an IVR to complete before doing something in the OpenSIPS on the OpenSIPS side. So there are a lot of crazy stuff that you can actually do with this integration at this point.
So when people start reaching out to you, what's the most common use case you see? What are they specifically looking for? I mean, they're obviously looking for like scalability, but what would be, in what context?
I would have to say that's a tough question because there are so many things that you can do with. There are so many scenarios actually where you can use OpenSIPS. But if I would be to pinpoint the most used scenarios, I would say that there are like two categories. One is when it comes to handling a lot of traffic, like doing kind of a wholesale trunking and stuff like that. So you just need something to carry, thousands of calls per second, millions of calls, stuff like that. So really heavy duty class 4. And the second one is when it comes to front-ending a class 5. Class 5 being PBXs, being gateways, whatever you want to call them. But generically, front-ending for security reasons, for scalability reasons, for management reasons, so for just to be sure that you can do a horizontal scaling, you can protect, and you can also offload as much as possible the class 5, because we know that all the resources at the class 5 layer are expensive in terms of processing. So you try to offload and take full advantage of what the class 5 has to offer. Whatever else can be done on the class 4, just do it over there. That was also the reason for the mid-registration module, right? To try to offload as much as possible in terms of the registration, the class 5 layer, without eliminating it completely.
Yeah,
so
it's like a bridge almost, if you think about it. It's the way to get people in there and start using it. I can't tell you how many people I talk to on pretty much a daily basis where their answer is just put more equipment out, when really it should be just proper set it up, have a SIP router out front and properly dispatch it.
Yeah, it's what we used to say, the class 5 sandwich. Take a class 5, put 2 OpenSIPs, one in the back, one in the front, and that's it. You're done. But that's one of the, let's say, most used scenarios, because it can handle, let's say, the whole traffic. So it can balance all the traffic that you need to distribute into your class 5. It allows you to clusterize the class 5 layer to protect it, because you can just throw it behind class 4, which is doing all the security stuff. You can offload, so in terms of SIP traffic that is not really necessary at the class 5 layer. And additionally, you may also use OpenSIPS just to enable more functionalities directly at the class 4 layer, instead of exclusively relying on the class 5 to bring functionalities. So it's a quite good, how to say, setup, symbiosis between.
What about microservices and stuff like that?
That's okay. With let's say, looking at it from the OpenSIPS perspective, it's a good controller for microservices, right? So it's a good class 4 layer that is able to control multiple microservices in terms of, let's say, generic dial plan. To identify the service, to route it, to do balancing between all the boxes providing a certain microservice, to provide high availability for that, so failover. So that's a typical let's say, approach if you want to implement like kind of a hosted class 5. You have the class 4 layer in front with OpenSIPS and the whole class 5 behind, is split in microservices. You have the, let's say, the IVR boxes. You have the typical PBX boxes, maybe for voicemail, for conferences. So, kind of a clusters of microservices, and you just put the logic in the class 4 in order to route the code between, to balance them, to do the failover, and so on. So in this case, it's a great tool.
Well, thank you, Bogdan. Are we going to start taking? Why don't we start taking questions from the audience?
Sure.
Oh, here's a good one. Okay, this question was submitted via YouTube by Richard Brenton. Will there be a new version of the OpenSIPS book that goes over mid-registration module and ESL integration?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably, okay, there is no plan for the moment, but if I would be to make a decision, or at least to make an estimation right now, I would say that we will have to wait for the 2.4, because the 2.4, the next year release, will be an LTS release. So let's say makes it worth the investment into writing a book for it. And also the 2.4 actually will be the last on the 2x branch. So there will be no 2 more 2. Whatever releases. After that, we will switch to 3.0, mainly because we are planning some really in-depth changes in terms of how the configuration of OpenSIPS works, how the message processing. So it will be some critical changes, and that will make us jump to 3.x releases. So being end of line for the 2x releases, 2.4 will be a good reason probably to get a book out. I will have to convince Flavio, or Flavio will have to convince me. Flavio Goncalves is the co-author of the book, of the OpenSIPS books. So we have to, let's say, to try to to motivate one each other to start writing a new one. But indeed, it will be fully justified. I mean, it will have the whole free switch, Homer, CG rate integration, will cover the clustering. So a lot of new things which are completely new for the 2x branches.
Well, I think even the last book came out relatively recently, within the past year or two, right?
I think it's like 2 years ago, if I remember correctly. It covers the 2.1.
So you got to slow down that coding a little bit. Books are...
Well, you know how it is. It's a lot of time invested in this in writing these books. I mean, checking, double checking, and yeah. And if you go and ask any developer, what's the kind of task you hate the most? It's writing documentation, which is equivalent to writing books. Like, give me a ton of code to write rather than writing a page of documentation. So that's why I'm saying that you have to find a lot of motivation to do it. But okay, indeed, that's a good resource for the community, so we have to do it.
So the same person asks, what is the OpenSIPS equivalent of HTables and Pike?
Well, Pike, it's the same. So there is a Pike module in OpenSIPS. That's quite for a long, long time. I think it's even from SER times. So, and for the HTables, actually, it's the local cache. It's exactly the same. Just have it's from our perspective, it's an internal kind of a NoSQL storage. Internal, I mean, directly in the OpenSIPS memory. It supports collections, so the equivalent of having different tables with different properties. And as it acts as a NoSQL database, so you have all the primitives to insert, remove, expire. You can operate with counters and all this. But we have functions and not variables in order to work with it. But as functionality, it's more or less the same.
Yeah, what I've always found really interesting is the concept of memory stores. People just think like a memory store at the end of the day, when you restart the system, that those memory stores are gone. But what they don't realize is there's functions to read and write from external sources. Load the information and then.
Yeah, that's actually I would say that may open a can of worms. We had 2 days ago a discussion on a system when for doesn't really what was the reason, but the idea was you had to cache approximately like 300 million routing rules, and the memory factor it's okay. It takes like maybe like I don't know 3 or 4 gigabytes of memory to cache all of them. But it may take like 10 minutes to load them from the database, So each time if you do a restart, you have to wait like 10 minutes just to get the data back into memory. So we are looking at the possibility actually to use kind of external cache for loading such data. So it will be, persistent across restarts. So whatever you had in the cache before, restart will still be over there, so you don't have to go through this nightmare of waiting 10 minutes to get the data loaded. That's something like we are looking around when it comes to caching. In the same time, you don't want to use a database because all the time, databases are quite strict in formatting, strict in what kind of operation you can do, and all the interfacing communication is quite slow.
So the next question is, does OpenSIPS have a favorite backend like Couch? Cassandra, is there one that is more deployed, tested, recommended, like FreeSwitch on Debian?
Okay. So if we look at the SQL layer, I would say that, looking at the community questions, I would say that the most used one, I'm not saying it's a favorite one, but the most used one is how people would like to call it. It's my first SQL. So it's a MySQL backend, but it's not limited to, so the Postgres, the Oracle, the SQLite and so on are as good as for the MySQL as alternatives. So we don't encourage people to use a certain one. Again, it's just based on what we notice from the community. If we go into the NoSQL side, again, looking at the questions, I would say that maybe Redis and Cassandra are somewhere on the top in terms of the questions. But again, that's a personal conclusion based on the mailing list. So let's not make it too generic.
Uh-oh, I think we might have lost Mike for just a second.
Oh, no,
okay, he's back.
So I think what they also meant to ask was there a preferred operating system as well?
Well, let's say most of the tests in terms of compiling, deploying, and stuff like that are on generic Linux. So either Debian flavored, either Red Hat flavored. So both of them do work. So we are good friends with Ubuntu, with Debian, with Red Hat, with CentOS, or whatever it's derived. We are trying to keep up with the BSDs, with Solaris operating systems, but because we are not using on daily basis something like that, of course, let's say maybe there are some small glitches and so on. But again, whatever it's Linux should work out of the box.
Okay, so we have one more question. Okay, so Dan Jenkins asks, will you be at ComCon in June?
In June? Sorry, what the Comcast? It's an event or what?
Yeah, Dan's having an event that is a RTC event.
Okay, where is this in, the event?
It's in the UK.
Oh, okay, so it's not so far away. It might, I think, to be honest, I personally suck when it comes to names. I don't remember good names like conferences and stuff like that. But I remember that maybe like 2 months ago, there was a discussion in the office. I think Resman put it on the table like, oh, look, there is this. And I remember that was WebRTC related event. And that's why I asked where it is, because I remember something about London or something about UK somewhere. And we said, okay, let's see, maybe, because it's, not so far away from here.
Okay.
And we do a lot of WebRTC stuff also, so why not?
So there's another question coming from YouTube, from Lance. Will you cover WSS on the next book, the secure WebSockets, which is somewhere?
Okay, yes, that's a good note, because the WebSocket secure layers were, I think, added in 2.2. So basically, there is no, let's say, no book covering the topic. So I would rather suggest maybe talk to Flavio to see if we can change the format of the book, instead of all the time starting from the scratch, with the whole OpenSIPS functionality, to do it rather maybe incremental to the previous books. So let's say we invented the wheel in the first book, and now to focus on what's new comparing to the previous version, because otherwise we'll end up like a really, really huge book. So nobody will want to buy it.
But everyone will have the little specific section that they'll read.
Yes, exactly. Like, can I buy only from 10 to 20 pages?
Never know. That may come one day. I mean, after all, we can buy one song off an album, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Bogdan. Back to you, Ken.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, cool. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Bogdan, for joining us today. Next week, we're going to have, who are we having next week? We're actually having Richard Newman from Sub2R will be joining us next week, showing off their new camera. If you're not familiar with Sub2R, they're making a low-cost 4K camera. They've got pre-orders open now, and so Richard's going to be joining us next week to show off the camera. I've got one here, so I'll be showing it off, and we'll be having a great conversation about that. So you guys join us back here on Wednesday the 13th at noon Central Time, and we'll see you guys then. Thanks, guys, and have a great week.
Thank you, Ken.
You've been watching ClueCon Weekly. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central. Keep up with the latest happenings by subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit us at freeswitch.com.